Hello, I am Dr. Ruth. I was a sniper in the Israeli army when I was much, much younger. But that's neither here nor there. You're listening to Dane Fitzgerald's Hype podcast. Now on with the interview with Juan David Rojas and Braudel Marx.
The board, as you were saying, in these authoritarian left countries. But there's also a strain of law and order kind of within the right wing that is obviously isn't libertarian. And Americans' prisons were pretty full up until they're just starting to release it. Maybe 10 years ago, they kind of backed off on that. But it was kind of a mini hukkala, where in the ghettos people were just rounded up and thrown in prison for obviously there were trials, but for small drug offenses. So yes, one thing from your article that impressed me was that in these authoritarian states, the leaders have to have a lot of skill. Bukele, whatever you say is very effective, and he's a statesman. He knows how to negotiate, how to get things done. Also, he knows how to blow his own trumpet and exaggerate.
Yeah, no, and his outreach, his PR abroad, especially on the international right, is incredible. I mean, you say something bad about this guy online, his minions, not necessarily Salvadorans, will come after you. It's crazy.
I was thinking like Putin.
He sort of celebrated like he celebrated like the mayor of Miami or something, right?
Yeah,
He likes crypto. He wants to attract top talent in business and he's going China because he understands that techno commercial future is for all of us and will take us to new heights of going back a minute ago about the way that authoritarian communist countries deal with crime. I would venture to guess that a law enforcement official in a communist country is further to the left than the typical civilian progressive is in a capitalist one.
Or do you mean to the right?
To the right. The law enforcement officer in a communist country right of the typical, Portland progressive, which I find kind of interesting, and it just goes to show how much an anti-law and order mentality is really taken hold in democratic progressive space.
Strange, actually.
Yeah, I mean, here's a great example, actually. The Venezuelan case is fascinating. I'll start here. Crime is a really complicated and interesting phenomenon. There's a lot of theories and studies that go into like what exactly causes crime to go up. In some cases, it is that economic conditions get worse, as in Cuba right now. There is a current crime wave in Cuba. On the other hand, there are cases where actually, as material conditions have improved and poverty has gone down, crime rates have increased. This happened, for instance, in Brazil under Lula and under Chavez in Venezuela. It was ridiculous. Under Chavez's term, homicides went up like 200%. But then there are other factors, the degree to which different routes for the drug trade are important. That's what's happened in Ecuador. A lot of internal dynamics within Colombia, and possibly the fact that synthetic drugs have become more important in the U.S. have caused European and Asian markets to become more attractive. That's led to interest in Ecuador's ports for the cocaine trade. But Venezuela, but broadly, another factor is, as I said before, the impunity rate of a country. Generally speaking, the higher a country's impunity rate, that meaning the percentage of crimes that are convicted, you see really high rates of crime. So before the state of exception in El Salvador, yeah, something like 90% of crimes went unprosecuted or unconvicted. That's basically the case in almost every Latin American country, or at least the important ones: Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, Guatemala, etc. If you manage to, and if you manage to lower the impunity rate, crime rates go down. And so the two countries in Latin America currently that have the highest or have the lowest impunity rates are Cuba and El Salvador. Similarly, they have the highest rates of incarceration. But Venezuela is interesting because they still have a really high impunity rate, which is interesting because it's such an authoritarian country. If they really wanted to, I think they could. They could basically do what Bukele is doing, but maybe it's just the fact that the country is so devastated. But on the other hand, authorities in Venezuela are extraordinarily lethal. I mean, they kill thousands of people per year. And what we've seen since they really scaled that up starting around like 2018 is that has actually managed to reduce homicides, at least. Yeah, they've gone down something like 60% in the past 5 years. And it's because the police just outright murders criminals.
You know, it's interesting. You hear on the right statistics like 40% of murders in LA. I'm just kind of throwing a number out there, go unsolved. So the clearance rate for murders has gotten worse.
Yeah, it has actually in the past few years. Yeah.
You know, the way you're describing it now, for the liberty-pilled right, I would say, well, the silver lining is that we're not authoritarian then. You know, there's many people are getting away with it. Yeah. So I have a friend from Chile. What do you think is the best country going in South America? Is it still Chile? Or is that even a proper question? You dispute the premise?
You're onto something there. Yeah, in the second part. I mean, it depends on how you look at it. So, you look at overall quality of life, infrastructure, just standard metrics for development. Chile is really up there. Actually, Chile also, and it's funny because crime is a huge issue for voters right now. But in comparative terms, Chile still has really low levels of crime, and actually their authorities are pretty good at solving crimes. It's something like 50% in Chile, which is way better, like exponentially better than in other Latin American countries. But on the other hand, I mean, yeah, there's a question of inequality. Chile is a really unequal country, and things kind of really stopped. The things in the country were kind of consistently got better overall in some ways up until the past, up until around 2014. And things have kind of just been stagnant, and that's led to a lot of political animosities and stagnation. But I mean, yeah, it's all kind of relative. I mean, in relative terms, even Argentina now, with all its current problems, is still a pretty developed country. You go to Buenos Aires, it has an amazing metro. I mean, it's actually pretty safe too. People on average make way more, than say in Guatemala. It's kind of, it's hard to parse. It's really, everything's relative. I mean, to the Chilean, they're upset because they feel that, and Argentines too, they feel that they should be way better than where they are, and telling them it's like, oh, well, you're better off than Honduras. Well, that doesn't really mean much for them. Alternatively,
like telling people in California, you got it better than Mississippi. I mean, even
exactly,
the Californians who don't live on the coast.
That's a great analogy, because California would just say, well, we should be way better than we currently are. Being better than Mississippi is meaningless.
Right.
On the other hand, a great example is Mexico. Violence, crime, really bad in a lot of parts of Mexico. They're not in all parts. It's a huge country. And and you talk to voters. I was in Mexico City a few weeks ago. Yeah, their chief criticism of the current government is that they haven't, and really of all the past like 4 governments, is that they've either made the crime situation worse or haven't been able to solve it. But on the other hand, a lot of things in recent years have really improved in Mexico. Wages have gone up, services have improved, poverty has gone down, and that led to people rewarding the ruling party. And it's actually kind of, when you put it in those terms, it's kind of outstanding that in spite of the crime, people still feel that their lives have gotten better and are supportive of the current president.
It puts the El Salvadoran situation in a somewhat different light. It's almost as if it's
the reverse. Actually, it's exactly the reverse.
Like if they had experienced incredible economic growth in El Salvador, might they have been willing to put up with the crime? Now maybe it's orders of magnitude so much worse than that.
That's possible, actually. Yeah, I mean, well, but what's funny is that most essentially, that maybe not, because most Central American countries do experience fairly high rates of growth. Like Guatemala typically averages like 5% GDP growth, but it's extremely unequal. Most of that just goes to a handful of oligarchs, and the average Guatemalan stays poor. What's odd in El Salvador is that not only is that growth is it's a poor country and growth is low, so it's just particularly terrible. It was like 1% last year. That's horrific in a country that poor.
Yeah, one of the benefits of being poor country is that you can experience more rapid growth.
Exactly. So when that doesn't happen, it's a double whammy. I mean, it just tells you nothing is going right.
So, what are your thoughts on Scheinbaum? How you say your last name?
Yeah.
Do you feel people are excited about that? Is it kind of usher in a new era, quote unquote?
Yeah. I was over there, talked to a lot of voters. People feel really good about both Scheinbaum and her mentor, current president Andrés Manuel López Obrador, AMLO, as he's known. She's a really different figure to him. We'll have to see if she takes a different track. Most likely, if she does, that'll be on like the energy transition. You know, she was on a UN panel. She has a PhD in energy engineering. Fingers crossed. My hope is that she takes a more measured approach. Which is possible. She already announced a lot of her cabinet picks, and it looks like there's a lot of continuity with the current government. My baseline, my case of contrast. I'm Colombian American, and I was actually also recently in Colombia. The current president over there, Gustavo Petro, had basically been trying poorly to do an energy transition at all costs, because he thinks we're all going to be dead in 12 years because of climate change. So he just outright stopped novel oil exploration. He's appointed all of these insane environmentalist ministers to key positions. That doesn't seem to be the case currently in Mexico. Sheinbaum is a decades-long opponent of privatizing Pemex. Who knows? I mean, yeah, we won't really know until she becomes president, but there's a lot of institutional momentum from the party that hopefully will keep her on the right track.
You know, it's interesting. When I think of climate science, I don't think populism, and I'm not saying that
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Now I know it might be a little different if you're actually from a hot country near the equator, where you see the effects of increasing heat and water resource constraints. Is she basically? What is the relationship in Latin America between global warming and climate science and populist politics? Is it kind of a winning issue?
That's an interesting question, because on the whole, you look at polls and also the positions that politicians take. The climate issue is generally popular, as in people favor taking action. But exactly what that means is in practice kind of depends. On the one hand, Latin America's carbon footprint is very low and has actually gone down, mostly because a lot of these countries get their energy from clean sources. Not actually really solar panels or wind, though a lot of countries have tried to boost that, but hydro is really big in countries like Colombia and Brazil. On the other hand, you do, especially on the left, there's a lot of variety. There's an extractivist bent that can be both good and bad depending on the government. So, for instance, Chavez, Maduro, huge oil guys. I mean, they kind of have to be. Venezuela is a one resource economy. There are these incredible charts I like to look at that show like the diversification of different economies, and Venezuela is insane. It's like 90% oil, and then 10% everything else. Countries, like Bolivia, gas is really big, and they're having an issue with that now. Mexico has also historically been really into oil. The Mexican left has been a huge proponent of, they essentially were the ones that created Pemex in the 30s, nationalized the energy sector, and created Pemex. In Ecuador, too, I wrote a piece about this, was really interesting. Current President Noboa, he actually campaigned on an environmentalist platform, said he didn't want to explore oil in one of the country's national parks. And his opponent, the leftist Luisa Gonzalez, ally of former President Rafael Correa, who lives in Belgium, Kevin, she ran on an extractivist platform. She said she wanted to drill in that national park. Funnily enough, Noboa also is a social progressive, in favor of LGBT rights and all of that stuff. Gonzalez is an evangelical Christian, very anti-abortion. So if you look into, you get these, I live in South Florida, so I get this stuff all the time, and it drives me insane. You get everything through a Cuban-American news filter. And that's all just obsessed with the Cold War and right versus left. But there's actually some interesting differences across both right and left and within each camp once you look into the detail.
Cuba looms large over there in the way that Mexico looms large from Texas to California.
Yeah.
And there's sort of like a runner-up, maybe Dominican Republic, maybe, and kind of influence. Puerto Rican. That's maybe more New York, and I don't know, Jamaica. Basically, the Caribbean looms large. Not all of it Latin American, where we consider that.
Puerto Ricans are more influential in Orlando. There's a huge Puerto Rican community in Orlando.
Okay, yeah, I was amazed at how much the landscape changed when I was going from North Florida to south, right around Orlando. After Orlando gets very, very flat.
Yeah.
And the buildings out there, I realized why they like towers so much along the coast there, because if it weren't for those towers, you'd get no elevation at all. I mean, you never overlook anything. But
it's incredible how flat it is. It's true.
But so the last part of this talk, let's switch to the so-called BRICS, of which Brazil is a member. So it does have a kind of a Latin American, South American tie in there. But Kevin, what do you think the prospects are for a BRICS coalition doing anything to bring about a more multipolar world or put a dent in America's hegemony?
Oh, it's playing a leading role. A Russian politician announced that 59 nations were seeking to join. Now, that doesn't mean this year there's going to be 59 nations, but no, there's definitely momentum and movement. The key is that it's a what's called a thin order. A thick order is like NATO, where they basically take your sovereignty. So you're no longer a nation anymore. A thin order, it's not as cohesive, but each unit has more sovereignty. And so the basic multipolar model is authoritarian states that favor local elites. so that each country, they have their elites that run things, and they have to be good, like Bukele and Xi and Putin. They have to be talented. Whereas in the globalized West, it's more globalist elites who are kind of behind the curtain. And so your actual people running the country, they could, like the debate last night, it makes no difference which one of these guys.
Yeah.
You could put Biden in a medically induced coma for 4 years, and the ship will run just fine because he's not really doing anything. And so, yes, I think that Charles de Gaulle always had a concept, a Europe of nations, which is different from the EU concept, which is more the globalist, Brussels controls everything. And so BRICS are basically a globe of nations. It's that organizational model where you keep sovereignty and you stay connected with trade connections, and you support each other in foreign policy. But it's not hyper strict, but you see Brazil, pretty much staying with Russia. And what's interesting, I don't know if you're familiar with Gilles Deleuze, a French philosopher. He had a concept called the rhizome, which is like a potato. It's like the way that growth can come. It's like a matrix. It's not just one, like a tree is the opposite. Like the US is like the tree and everyone's kind of branched off from it. With a rhizome, so for example, like El Salvador isn't too excited about Russia, but China they get along with, so they get connected in there. Whereas the opposite, you have India and North Korea, who maybe aren't so excited about China, but boom, they connect with Russia, and then the connections all start coming. So it's an interesting organizational setup, and I think it's going to do very well because it's extremely flexible. And so depending on what you need at the time, you can still look after your interests. You have enough flexibility there, but you also have the power of a network that, and so I think more and more people, particularly, if you're running a country, you want power. If you're a local elite, you don't want to, what can, like if you're in the West, if you're a local elite, you might, if you do everything you're supposed to, you'll get a job at a multinational, your children will be treated well, or maybe in an international institution, a prestigious one. What's Macron going to do after all this? That he'll fall up somewhere. And so, whereas in the small, like Thailand, these kind of semi-peripheral countries, they want their power in their country, and BRICS allows this that setup. And so America's having a hard time trying to convince these countries, no, just let these invisible men make all your decisions for you. And so yes, I think it's a serious challenge. Slow, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's a very it's a good model, attractive model for what we could call second world countries. And eventually first world countries. Hungary, Serbia, China went and visited them. They're going to get their, connect into Europe, and then other countries are going to connect in. It's a very interesting model.
Yeah, it sounds a bit healthier in the sense of not putting all your, foreign policy eggs in one basket. It sounds like the relationships are a bit more cross-cutting, and not so much. I don't know if it's fair to call Europe a collection of vassal states or something. I know they talk about in that way. People like
I think it's fair. I think it's very fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's just clearly where security umbrella or none. Yeah.
Since Ukraine, Europe has just thrown their sovereignty completely away.
Yeah.
20 years ago, maybe 18 years ago, I worked with some serious European defense people, and they were very much about European sovereignty, and they're very suspicious of America. This is after the Iraq War. There was a lot of tension, and they were like, this NATO thing isn't going to last too long. This is a temporary arrangement. We're going to be sovereign. We're going to have a European defense network. But of course, then when I would talk to them in more detail, the military guys would say, well, the problem is if we all join together, there's going to be a lot of layoffs. It's like a merger. a lot of people are going to lose their local positions, and so they decided it was just better to be a satellite of America than to look after themselves, and now they're regretting it.
Yeah, presumably these countries all have competent coast guards, right? Why can't they just kind of scale that up into their own defense? We started off with only a coast guard. They might have to go back to the drawing board, but it is kind of strange the way that kind of autonomy has died. I remember when the left was mostly skeptical of EU, or the most skeptical of the EU. When the neoconservatives, laid down the gauntlet saying that Poland is with us on Iraq, they are new Europe, and all of you over in France and Germany and Norway,
yes,
you're all old Europe.
Time. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like old Europe has been resuscitated by Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah. I'll say two things. Actually, one of which you kind of alluded to, Dane, and on the other, I'll slightly quibble with a statement you made, Kevin, that I would dispute Brazil being aligned or favoring more Russia. Even under Bolsonaro was very favorable. I'll go back to what I said. Brazil traditionally has had a non-aligned posture towards geopolitics that transcends actually whoever's in office. Bolsonaro famously was indeed more favorable towards both Trump and the US, but even people forget this, he traveled to meet with Putin like 2 weeks after Russia's invasion of Ukraine and still continued trading with Russia. So on the other hand, Lula has advocated for a genuinely non-aligned position, which I'll be honest, I do support. I like that he is critical of both the Ukraine war and the war in Gaza. And Brazil's posture, which is a one that I use also to critique a lot of like the DC apparatchik buzz on China and Latin America. The reality, guys, is that if we have nothing to offer these countries, where are they going to go? They're going to go to Russia and China. I just roll my eyes whenever I read anything about, this or that country signed this with China. They received this foreign minister, blah, 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 blah. Okay, where are we? What are we doing? So
exactly, you're exactly right.
It's we can only blame ourselves for not investing in these countries or just being completely AWOL in a lot of cases. Brazil, Lula has this really great industrial plan that he's used to try to attract manufacturing. Announced earlier this year, it's actually led to a number of factories from a host of multinational companies from China and from the West, Stellantis and the like. So they really are in a position where they want both us and China, Russia to compete for their attention, and Lula and a lot of people in his administration have said that they are all into friendshoring, anything that the U.S. wants to invest in order to bring supply chains closer or to a more friendly country. They are more than willing to accommodate. We just have to actually do it.
Did you say
I think it's important.
friendshoring? I'm sorry, friendshoring. That's a good term.
Yeah. Because Brazil is still. Some people have said that Brazil could participate in friendshoring as opposed to nearshoring because it's still pretty far. Then again, I guess it's still depending on where in Brazil closer than China.
The BRICS model isn't exclusionary, and so Russia still trades with Europe. The West it's an open network. Brazil obviously will take investment from America, and the more and more America invests and gets connected into BRICS, the less they can fight it. Actually, the more they become somewhat dependent on it, and so that's kind of the growth model. Because BRICS wants this to be the whole world, basically, everyone to be connected in eventually.
Yeah,
and so
I'll also say this to try to give both sides I think we do currently live in a multipolar world. I think the influence of especially China, but also Russia and yeah, and some of the middling powers, India, Turkey, Brazil, South Africa, etc., has also grown, and the influence of the U.S. has declined, mostly because of our stupidity and our horrific foreign policy in general. But on the other hand, whenever I see these discussions about decoupling from the dollar, such and such countries using the yuan, actually, dollar usage is at its highest point in history still. And on the other hand, the U.S. is still very, very influential and has its hands in so many different places all over the world. Some of us might argue that's the problem. But yeah, it depends. We still have, the #1 military in the world. Some have argued, I think correctly, that Russia and China are more efficient in their construction of military equipment. They spend a lot less than we do, but they get better results in relative terms. So yeah, I don't like either the alarmism that we're doomed and game over, but on the other hand, rah rah rah, we are just this incredible nation that can do no wrong is also not helpful in my opinion.
The worst that's going to happen is America could fall back to regional power status. It's so full of natural resources and innovative, creative people. It's not going to fall that far. And as you say, it takes a long time for a reserve currency to change. And to be honest, the Chinese don't want. There's a lot of responsibility and problems. A lot of the problems, the deindustrialization of America since the 70s, is because of the dollar as a reserve currency. You have to run deficits.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll actually there's another interesting Latin America point I can make on this. AMLO and Morena in Mexico. They're left wing, and there's this obnoxious Puerto Rican communist that post stuff praising AMLO all the time if he says something against the DEA or anything mildly critical of the U.S. Yeah, he likes to saber rattle, but at the same time, Mexico is part of the USMCA, and big bad nationalist AMLO has said himself he is not interested in de-dollarization. On the contrary, they recognize that it is in their interests to continue in the USMCA, and actually he has also said that Mexico will never join BRICS. So it's a good point.
Yeah, that just would to be make maybe a bridge too far.
Kind of a high level point about the U.S. A lot of people who understand market processes and how it is not zero sum, the generation of wealth. When it comes to America's place in the world, they seem to be very zero sum. They fall back on the positional good of, as opposed to a kind of normal good. That unless America remains on top, it's actually in decline. Whereas we can comprise a smaller share of the world GDP or of the world's complete economic wealth and call fewer of the world's shots and still be actually getting wealthier and internally improving.
Absolutely.
They seem to think that we can't do that.
Yeah, so, a lot of people do make that conflation. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I'm kind of just like, that the old school peace and free trade type. When I want to see America's footprint reduced, it's not because I hate America. It's because I think that maybe our deals will withstand that just fine.
Yeah.
But yeah,
the dollar will have to have less power. It could still be traded, but it's very hard to manufacture in America still, because the dollar brings so much power to it. It's almost like a welfare state for some people. This powerful dollar, because people can go to Walmart and buy all these cheap trinkets, and so in order for the U.S. to become a proper regional power, industrial power, the dollar is going to have to decline to some extent. so that there's a reason to build in America.
Mm-hmm.
And so that transition could be painful. It could take a decade.
I'm not even particularly concerned about industrialization. I'm kind of with the kind of, you know, economistic new secular right on that. You know, I'm not so sure that reindustrializing is even a good, in my opinion.
Oh, I strongly disagree with you there, Dave, but that might be a topic.
But I'm still like a non-interventionist and all that. So
okay, I agree with you there. I'm very non-interventionist.
No, I mean, what's the economy going to look like? Oh, here's the counter. I mean, robotics are
we never really know
so
what it's going to look like. It's an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. Yes. I mean, but economy's going cycles, and we're in a financialization stage, but we're reaching the end of it, and so it always eventually has to flip back to industrialization, to production, to manufacturing. It's just the way the cycles go. So, and also, what are people going to do?
Well, I mean,
not everyone's a lawyer.
Those cycles are also driven by discrete decisions by policymakers. I don't think that it's necessarily inevitable. We could choose to continue doing what we're doing, and that very well could happen. I think it will doom us, but.
Well, I can think of at least one kind of industrialization I'd be on board with, and that's, you know, just shoring up the condition of our roads and bridges and all of that.
Yeah.
Which we will need for self-driving trucks to move along and not encumber problems. Right? But anyway, yeah, I think I'm going to wrap it up. If anyone wants to, say any outgoing words, go for it.
One very brief comment. You had mentioned John Mearsheimer, and so to prepare, I listened to a speech of his today on Israel, and I was just amazed. He hits every note. He has his view on the situation, I would say, is crystal clear and perfect. He knows what he's talking about, and he's correct. And Israel's in a very tough situation right now.
Yeah.
And so it's not going well.
Yeah. I'm part realist and part like just kind of, basic bitch, bleeding heart, anti-war liberal. I'm just about 1/3 that, 2/3 realism. And I think he kind of ends up, a lot of what his rhetoric is probably about maybe 80-20 rather than my 60-40 as far as that goes. But in any case, yeah, cool. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
I guess I'll say this, which is basically just rephrasing what I said in the beginning. Amoral can also be stupid, and that's actually the worst outcome.
Yeah. I hate how some of the smug, not neoconservative, but very hawkish on Israel people on the right wear this amoral realism on their sleeve, like it just makes them these.
Yeah. Like I said, it's like the amoral aspect of it strengthens them. They think it strengthens them. Yeah.
Yeah. Look how unencumbered I am by your ridiculous, outdated slave morality. Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, cool. Nice talking to you guys.
Great talking to you.
Bye.
Bye.
Game over.